I got you on top of the New Testament, so hopefully that helps.
Okay. Okay. Well, may we have a blessed podcast.
What's that?
May we have a blessed podcast.
Absolutely.
Yes. um, hey, I hope your day was better than mine. I had a crazy one.
Yeah,
So, yeah. Uh, School communications can be a interesting world.
I have no doubts.
So, all right. So you've listened to the podcast before, so we'll kind of follow that same route, and where you can kind of introduce yourself and your writing to everybody once we get going, and it'll flow.
That's
It's
good.
been good so far. I've been looking forward to this one. I'll be honest, because I think what you do is a little bit different than what we've had on here before. So this will be a good time, I
Oh,
think.
good. Excellent.
Excellent. So, um, yeah, the standard first question is, what's Hank's background? Where are you from? I know that from the bio, but tell everybody where you're from and kind of what your background is and how you got into writing.
Yeah, I was born in Texas, um, and I kind of bopped around, but I grew up mostly in Statesboro, Georgia,
Hmm.
and then I'm in New York now, and I moved here from Southern Indiana. It's like the whole thing's like it's like Texas, California, Georgia, North Carolina, Indiana, New Jersey, Indiana, New York. It's a
Yeah.
little too much moving around for sure. Um, but I think I got into writing like two separate times in my life. Once when I was like, in middle school and reading Stephen King and stuff. And I was like, I should try this, like as an arrogant sixth grader.
Yeah.
And then I got into it again in my like late teens, early 20s, sort of like leaving music school, then starting to study like comparative literature and philosophy. And then I ended up dropping out of school entirely for the sake of carving out more time to write, which is either the best decision I made or the absolute worst. Remains to be seen. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the trajectory, I suppose.
It's interesting that the people we've had on so far, so many of them are musicians, or music has entered into it for them. And I was reading your bio, and I've traveled a lot, just like you've traveled a lot, and it's interesting how that plays into how we ride. So you've traveled pretty much across the country with that background. Do you find little pieces of everywhere that you've been and what you do, or do you what portion really of your travel really affects what you do more? I think home does more for me, and I mean I've been overseas and I've been to other states like you, but home seems to always hit home the hardest. I just wonder if that's the same. If that's the same for you. Do you find Texas and Georgia creep in more than other places, or does
I
New
mean,
York
Georgia,
does New York do it?
Georgia for sure. I find, I mean, other than my most like the last novel, the one I'm still trying to sell,
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything that I've written that's taken place in a city. And yeah, I think the sort of rural upbringing in Georgia, growing up on farms and stuff, sneaks in more. But that first book is like, that's all line cook, Southern Indiana,
Mhm. Mhm.
college town shit.
Yeah.
I feel like I moved around too much at like too many like significant like you know ages, right? It was like elementary school, I found myself in Georgia. Then halfway through middle school is North Carolina. Right at the beginning of high
Mhm.
school, all of a sudden I'm in Indiana. So like place is this like within my own work and approach, place is this really amorphous, like uh, kind of a difficult question.
Yeah.
I stopped a long time ago. I stopped writing towns with names and
Yeah.
brands to like just avoid that sort of thing entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of got you either have to invent one or leave it nameless, I
Yeah,
think. Or you can do like I talked about in the last pod. You can write about your place, but you better change the name, because I think you don't want to get in that Thomas Wolfe thing where people know exactly who you're writing about.
right, right,
Even though you are. So
absolutely.
you're in the capital writing there in New York City, and
Yeah,
probably more than anybody we've talked to. You more outlets and readings and things that you can go to, workshops and all kinds of craft things. Like, for a writer, is it the heaven that we're sold that it is, or is it the hard slog, or
oh
where
man,
where where is New York on that spectrum?
New York is. I've been here for 7 years, and it's hell. Like it's it's this weird problem where you come out here to like chase whatever. You come out here for whatever reason, and then you're here and you get to a certain point. You're like, do I have to be here? And it's like it doesn't matter if you have to be here anymore. You can't leave.
Yeah.
You don't have a
Yeah.
car anymore. It costs a bunch of money to like leave the state. It's a real like you kind of get trapped a little bit. That's not to say that I don't like it here and I regret the move at all. Like I wouldn't be where I'm at if I wasn't in New York. I don't think because I just wouldn't have met certain people, and I'm not enough
Mm-hmm.
internet guy to have found them on a forum or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I go to readings a couple times a week. I do a reading or two a month at this point. Um, I've led workshops. I've attended some. It's out here, but I don't know, like the cultural scene is very, very strange. There's this whole thing in downtown Manhattan, and if you're on Twitter and writer Twitter, you've probably heard about it and stuff, like the Dime Square sort of thing. Just like these trust fund fascists writing auto fiction, and it's a real bummer, dude. I'm gonna be on record saying some shit on this podcast that I should not be saying.
It's okay. It's okay. I wrote. You'll probably read it when you get off here, but I wrote a book review today that when I wrote it, I thought maybe I was being too harsh, and then after I reread it, after I put it up, I'm pretty sure I wasn't too harsh. I think sometimes you want to love everybody's work, and I think when you have to be blunt, that can be tough. So I don't have any problem with you talking about trust fund fascists because that's not auto fiction I want to read anyway.
Yeah. No, I
So,
actually just got done. I was reading that review. I live above a bar, and I was down there waiting on my partner to get home. That's why the beginning of the podcast was a little touch and go because they were on their way out. They're going to hang out at the bar till we're done.
yeah.
But I did read that review, and I like that that thing you said with it. You said like this is probably a pretty good book if you can put up with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing again, and I think if the guy listens to this or sees it or anything, like I mean, we can have a discourse about it. It's in no way mean spirited, but when we were talking about place earlier, that's kind of you have to get that right because somebody from Indiana, Georgia, Arkansas, Texas, New York City, wherever it is, if you don't get it right, somebody's going to put it down. And that's the last thing we want people to do is put it down. That's the first book I haven't finished in quite a while,
Yeah,
and I hate that because, like I said in the review, it had everything in there to be good. It was just
right.
one of those things that it didn't hit the right spots. And I know when I wrote mine, one of the hardest things that I had to do was get it went across couple had a couple time jumps in it. We went from 68 to 73 to 98. Okay.
Sure.
So when I was talking about 73 in Mississippi, I wanted to talk about some really cool places in Mississippi that are there now, but I couldn't use them because I wanted to get those details right, even though they were built 1 year after the year
Yeah,
that I was writing in. I just couldn't slide it in there. So that's super important. I'm in the 2.5 podcast for the Justin Lee episode. I'm gonna really talk about that, about the importance of place and authenticity and getting that right. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's like I said in the review. Like I've been pissed for 2 days about that. So you want to read something and you're like, oh, like you just ripped my guts out. So
yeah,
I think the thing I've been looking forward to the most with talking to you is I think you seem to have a different process and a different kind of I know you do a little bit more than me, and I think some of the others have been on here. So I really want to kind of pick your brain about what your process is, and then we can get into influences and stuff later because I think that's going to be really enlightening. But what's your process? When and where do you write? Because I'm assuming, and again, this is me drawing a broad brush here, so I might be going right across what I just said. But
sure.
in New York, are you in a small flat like everybody else, or what's your situation there? Have you got one of the stereotypical little
Yeah.
apartments, or
My partner and I live in a 1 bedroom shotgun
Mhm.
or Shotgun or Railroad in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. and it's a pretty big spot, but it is like, there's no doors. It's like all one room and like little
Right.
half. So I have like an office and library area, and then we have our room, and then it's the
Mhm.
dining room and the kitchen. Um, and I tend to write like I try to write in the mornings. It's the only time that I can really do it. And my partner works like a 9 to 5 right now, and I make up what I can't make writing as a bartender
Mhm.
currently still. Hopefully that changes soon. But yeah, I try to write in the mornings, um, and throughout the day, and then when they get home, it's hang time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm a 5 o'clock in the morning guy, and then throughout the day, as you get the chance, lunch break,
Yeah,
whenever you can sneak it in. But probably 5 right now is when I'm getting the most done. It used to be in the afternoon,
man,
but
I wish I was a I could I the big motivation for trying to get out of bartending is I grew up like kind of farm kid adjacent, like
Mhm.
5 a.m. is breakfast to me.
Yeah,
And like being a bartender in a city where the bars close at 4 a.m., it's like
yeah,
noon is the new morning, and I hate it. And I've hated it for
yeah,
7 years. But when COVID hit, like I didn't send you this book because I didn't know. It's just the book that just recently got released of mine is like long as fuck. It's like
mhm,
160,000 words, and I wrote it over COVID because um, the unemployment program for service workers and musicians, or like freelance performers, was really good. So I didn't work it all that year and a half, and I became a monk, dude. I like no
mhm.
smoking, no drinking, in bed by 9 a.m. every night or 9 p.m. every night for a year and a half, and up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I wrote that book during that time, and like I look back and I'm like, that is the lifestyle that I want.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do. We're gonna try to figure out how to make that closer to a reality.
You get lulled into that because my book was kind of a COVID book too. I started it, of course, as a teacher. We had the same situation. We were
Right.
out for, of course, in Arkansas, we weren't out as long as some other places. But I still had, 6 months almost to get that started and outline and everything. And that was a huge help because I learned a lot about the process, because I don't know that if I would have had that, uninterrupted time, that you could put something like that together. Like, it is nice to have that. Just what was that thing I saw earlier this week? Somebody posted on Twitter that creatives need time to themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
You really do, because if you don't, I was getting so much done and wrote so many stories and got that book started that I can't find the time to do now. The ideas still come. It's just, when can you put them down on paper or on the screen? And that's
Yeah,
that's the part I've found the most difficult, is making the time to actually put it down. The inspiration's there, the time's not there.
always. The ideas are always going to be there. Like, and that's not the part to be precious about ever. Like you have to be precious about the time and how you use it,
Hmm.
and like really, really use it. Um, that I'm like a meticulous outliner when it comes to that. Like, if I have an idea for a story, I try to get it down in bullet points, or I do these like sort of visual representations of like story arcs, um, just so that I always have like a running catalog of
Yeah.
stuff that when the time comes, I can pull it and still draw on that well.
I tend to stick mine in the notes app on my phone when they come, and then I can go back to them and pull them out when they're ready. Because you've probably heard me talk about my exorcism writing on here already. I mean, I just tend to get them all out in one go and then go back and edit later. But I can get the little bulleted, like you, the little bulleted outline. It's not meticulous, but at least I know, okay, this is what it's about. This is how it's going to start. This is the middle, and how it's going to end. And then I can go back and flesh that out. But
Right.
um, getting that getting your brain to work that early in the morning takes some adjustment. It did for me. I'm
Certainly.
usually dead until the coffee hits, and then, then you can usually move. But the one thing I do like about it, and if the bartending goes the way you want it to go, and you're able to get up at 5 and do that, the best thing, and it may be different in New York. I know it's different in St. Paul and Minneapolis and other big cities. Here, it's the most quiet time of the day. there is nothing going on. There's not a dog barking. There's not a bird chirping. And it's like the only time in my day where I've got everything to myself,
Yeah.
because I know once 7:30 rolls around and those buses start running and we start taking kids to school and teachers start showing up, my day can go crazy real quick. So it's nice to have that 5 to 7, that 2 hours where you can get something done.
Right.
And then slam a 10-minute shower and drive to work.
Yeah.
So, uh, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I'm surprised how many people do that. I've almost sometimes thought about doing the opposite and doing it at night between, but the thing with 5 o'clock is you can always get up earlier and that work day is going to be the same. But if you start working till 2, 3 in the morning, you're
Yeah.
not getting enough sleep. And
Yeah.
even though I would probably prefer to work till 2 or 3 in the morning, that's just not conducive to, life right now.
Right. I can't think for shit past 9 p.m.
Mm,
Like I've done the late night write thing in the past, and it's soup for me. It just like once if the sun's not out, if it's not light, if it's not like living time, I have a
yeah.
really difficult time doing any work.
I think the most difficult thing for me is when I was writing my first one, the one that's coming out next year. I was getting like inspiration at like noon.
Yeah.
So I would have to like write these ideas down, and then when my lunch would roll around, like there would be days where I just wouldn't eat, or I would start taking my lunch, and I would just shut the door to my office, pull the shade down, and write for an hour
Right.
solid. And if you got 100 words, if you got 350, someday you got 500. They might not be good, but at least you got 500 words on the paper. You can whittle down into the
Absolutely.
good words. And I think a lot of people sometimes get stuck with, I've got to write so many words. No, you just got to write good words.
Yeah. No. No. For sure. And getting the slop on the page is like the kind of the first step. Like editing meticulously is like I think the key to any type of good writing, regardless of
Mhm.
what style you operate within or your subject matter. Like it's all about the edit.
Some people, I can't do this. I know some people do. Some people will edit as they go, and I don't know how they ever finish a book because, golly, I drive myself crazy. Do you edit as you go, or do you knock it
Yeah.
out and put it up?
No, I tend to sort of like comb through as I go. And I like I primarily work in like the novel form. Like
Hmm.
I don't consider myself a short story writer at all. I don't think I'm good enough for that. It's like I do a couple of short stories every now and then, but it's hard. Every idea that I have just like turns into
Yeah,
something of a plus 40,000 word count.
I totally understand that. I think I was talking to might have been JD, the one that's going to come out in March. Um, I want to write short stories, but I tend to look at it as in like a sports season kind of thing. I write short stories in the off season when I'm not working on a novel. Um, oh,
Are we back?
there he is. He's back. Thought I'd lost you there for a minute. We didn't end the recording. We're still good.
All right.
Um, but yeah, I tend to I tend to do that in downtime because I feel like if I ever get out of a novel, I'm done and those characters die, and it's hard for me to go back and
Yeah,
resurrect them. So,
sustaining a novel is tough. That's why I do all like that's why I outline the way that I do. And I don't know, maybe the way that I outline is I've talked to other writers about it, and they're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
mhm.
But I I don't know. I the only like academic training I have other than or in anything really is in music. So like I tend to outline in terms of like idea development and stuff like that, and it's really helpful to have all of that because everything's like predetermined in this way, and it's just like solving the puzzle of how to get the thing
Mhm.
to the next thing that you've pre-decided needs to happen.
Yeah. I, do you write? Do you write freehand or do you write on a program?
I write on Word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I use Scrivener, and you were talking about having all that stuff. Man, I find it super easy to have those little storyboard pieces, like where you can just pull over. I used it a lot on the first book. I didn't use it as much on the second book, but that first book with the timelines the way they were, like I had to have all that stuff right. So,
Right.
the buddy of mine writes freehand. I'm like, I don't know how you do that.
That's
That's
nuts.
double the work. That's double handling.
His
You know?
forearms have got to look great though. Hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Who was the guy? He's running for Senate now. He used to play for the Dodgers. Steve Garvey had the giant forearms back in the day. Yeah, he's got Steve Garvey, Betty Davis eyes, and Steve Garvey arms. Oh, all right. So let's get to the good stuff here, because this is what you mentioned, music, and I'm sure we'll go into that too. Um, Influences and books that inspired you to become a writer.
I mean, I think the book that like sticks the most out for me when I look back at when I started writing quote unquote seriously in my like early 20s
Mm-hmm.
was reading In the Heart of the Country by William Gass.
Mm-hmm.
Like that book blew me wide open just because every story in that's like I didn't know you could do this thing this way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like there's the level of style that Gas writes with is just it's unparalleled. It's crazy, like the craft. Um, and I guess that's kind of what I look for in general with the books that I'm reading and the things that I'm interested in. Is like so much of it is stylistic,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is like kind of a hard thing because I feel like a lot of stuff gets sold based off of its idea or like what it's talking about, and I couldn't give a shit what you're talking about if it's not like
Mm-hmm.
pretty, you know, if it's not
Yeah.
cool sounding, I guess, which is I
Yeah.
guess probably where the music stuff comes in as well.
I think. Do you ever have this thought, or maybe I'm just the only weirdo? Do you ever have this thought that some of the people that we really love couldn't get a deal today?
Oh, 100%. I mean, a lot of the people we really love couldn't have gotten a deal in their own lifetime.
Mm.
You know, like I think
Mm-hmm.
about someone like Melville,
Yeah.
who we should be talking about all the time, always, forever. Like Melville is the fucking king of American letters, in my opinion. Moby Dick was never going to get published today, yesterday, beginning of the 20th century. You know, it happened at a time when it needed to, and it ruined his career. You know, it completely tanked everything. And then all of the works post Moby Dick are still some of the most experimental works in the American canon. Like Confidence Man is the most insane novel I've ever read, and pales in comparison to, or everything else sort of pales in comparison. You like Ulysses is a cakewalk after Confidence Man.
We've all walked that Ulysses road, so
Yeah.
I've got to get that and read it because I've fought through Ulysses. I've never took the journey with Finnegan's Wake, but I did do Ulysses.
I love
Uh,
Ulysses. Finnegan's Wake, I think, is really cool. I think, like, the last time I tried to read it, I made 300 pages before I was like, all right, he's going to do this the whole time. I get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
uh,
I took a Faulkner course in college, and the guy that taught it, it was an independent study, so it was just me and him. You
cool.
know, so he's like, we're gonna pick out the books you want to read, and I'm like, okay. So I come in with a list, and he's like, well, we've got to read Sound and Fury, and so I read it, and I came back, and he sits down, and he just smiles at me, and he's like, so you made it through the first chapter? I said, yeah, and he said, well, you are in a exclusive club because most people don't make it through the first chapter.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I felt after that, okay, I'm going to branch out. I'm going to read Ulysses. I'm going to read some of this other modernist stuff. And I think if you don't dip your toe in, you don't know what writing can be. I mean, I love I I didn't really get into a lot of really modern stuff, and the guy I'm going to name is absolutely, I don't think, a modernist at any in any conversation, but I love Jim Harrison. Like just
Yeah.
the poetic way that, and he's a great poet, but the way that he writes his prose has also got that same kind of style to it. And I don't write that way, but I've picked up so much stuff from him in the way that he can turn a phrase and the way he can put a sentence together. Like I highlight so much more in a Jim Harrison book than I do any other book. And I think, you know, you brought up something about that on Twitter not too long ago about uh, how words can sing on a page. Do you want to elaborate on that for everybody else that may not have caught on to what we
Yeah.
were talking about there?
Yeah. I posted about how I was just curious when it comes to like people's reading experience, whether they were actually saying the words in their head or if they were, you know, just letting the language render whatever image the language renders. And I think that there are like in this sort of way like two types of readers where it's like a spectrum or something, but like some writers just sound real good,
Hmm.
and then and they can kind of write about anything. That's like something I love about Gas, or even Gaddis to a certain extent, especially like something like the Recognitions. But those sentences are just they're melodies,
Hmm.
and you do get to the point sometimes you're like, I can't see any of this. Like I don't know. I literally don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Hmm.
But it was real pretty,
Hmm. Yeah.
like it almost like it's this thing where it's like, we like the complexity of like modernist text and like quote unquote experimental writing or whatever, like, and the confusion that comes with it, right? I have this like contention where it's like, but if the sentence is beautiful, it almost encourages you to reread it. So maybe its obscurity or its ambiguity isn't exactly a fault. Like maybe the having to reread it is like part of this feature. It's like the music just keeps going.
Hmm.
Uh, but I do think that there are readers that don't do that, um, or expect it sort of like in a different way.
Yeah. I think I think that makes a lot of sense because you can, and also in a way where you can be reading something where you have absolutely no frame of reference to.